It's standing right behind you.
So, in episode 4 of Severance Season 2, which is titled Woe's Hollow, we got some brand new Eagon lore, and holy crap, it is so wild. So, I want to break it all down for y'all, but please stick around to the end because I have one of my own theories on what I think this lore could mean for the wider Severance world. As explained by Seth Milchek, Dieter Eagon was the twin brother of Lumen founder Keir Eagon. Though this puzzles the MDR team as they've never heard of him because, as Milchek explains, the text was too sacred even for the severed floor. On his deathbed, Keir Eagon dictated a fourth appendix documenting Dieter Eagon. This mysterious text is located in the Scissors Cave, the same grotto that Keir first tamed the four tempers, which is Woe, Frolic, Dread, and Malice. So Keir and his brother were best friends as boys. There's not a specific age, but from an illustration, I would guess they were maybe between 8 and 10. Dieter convinced his brother to run away with him to the woods and to live as paupers or poor people. Despite Keir not really loving this plan, he did it anyways, and together they left the comfort of their home. This woods would later be called Woe's Hollow. It struck Keir that his brother was more at home in nature than in the comforts of their home. It was almost as if he was a part of the woods, which is huge foreshadowing. So this is where things get weird, and I mean very freaking weird. As recounted in Chapter 1, after the snow thaw, assuming this means springtime, Dieter became, quote, an instrument of nature. Then it goes on to say that Keir had no choice but to listen as he, quote, spilled his lineage upon the soil, end quote. Now, we get the second part of this story from the campfire. Assuming this takes place right where we left off, Dieter, after this episode, refuses to wash himself despite the waterfall being a prime place to bathe in. The two brothers roasted a hare they had hunted and had a joyous night telling rhyming jokes. As the night grew on, Keir tells Dieter that despite having a great time with him, they must return home to his father, and then he promised to look after Dieter in the ether mill. All of a sudden, Dieter made this horrifying whimper/wailing sound. Then Dieter's eye popped out of its socket and a torrent of pus came pouring out. Dieter, in panic, reached at his hair, which suddenly was moss, which tore easily from his bleeding scalp. At this point, the pus from his eye turned into a thick sap. It's at this point that Keir turns away from his brother and walks towards the pool of the hollow because the roar of the waterfall would drown out his brother's cries. It was in this very spot that Keir first encountered the temper Woe. He goes on to describe this temper as, quote, a gaunt bride half the height of a natural woman. This woman spoke to Keir seemingly through her eyes and said, quote, this is your doing. You suffered this wantonness. Now he's no one's brother, only chaos's whore, end quote. Thus ends the story.
Well, isn't that special?
In the episode, Helly, who we now confirmed is actually Helena Eagon, finds the story very funny, which I think is interesting, and this has been pointed out before online, as she has absolutely no reverence for this material at all. This is in stark contrast to Helena when we see her taking on Lumen responsibilities like official meetings, etc. To her, it's all a sham, it's all a fairy tale. Her laughter also, is infectious and it causes the others to laugh. And this is interesting because it kind of does mirror the story of Dieter and Keir laughing over a roaring fire. And this results in the entire team, including Miss Wong, not getting to toast marshmallows. And I think maybe this is symbolic of how when the rich mess up, it trickles down to the poorer people. Okay, so I know this was a lot, but I want to break this all down. And again, I'm going to weigh in with my own theory. So Irv asks if this is a fable or if this actually happened to Dieter. Milchick says it's 100% true, which probably isn't the case. We haven't seen anything supernatural in the series thus far, so unless otherwise mentioned later on, I think we can assume this is a metaphorical story, and here are some theories I found online. This is pretty self-explanatory, but one Redditor suggests that Dieter was the joyous and whimsical side of Keir Eagon that, after a harsh experience in the wilderness, died, which could be connected to the Temper's woe, yes, but also frolic. Maybe the end result of him pleasuring himself and the shame of that event killed this side of Keir Eagon. I like this theory. It's really simple, and I think it neatly fits into the world building. And while I like the last theory, I don't like this one. There is a theory that Rickon, everyone's favorite author, actually wrote this fable, assuming that this was just meant for MDR to hear. And we know that prior to this episode that Rickon has been working with Lumen on retooling his book, so I don't think it's that far-fetched. However, I legit think this was written on Keir's deathbed. Why? It's a lot for people to kind of whip up this book for this retreat. Speaking of, we already know this retreat seems to have been a thing already. Milchick in his video is describing summer events, yet this takes place in dead of winter. But this book is huge, and sure, maybe the bulk of the pages are blank, but you would have to make it look old, commission illustrations. It's just a lot. Plus, we hear this creepy voice, presumably from Keir Eagon, dictating on what sounds like an old wax cylinder. So I don't know. I kind of think this theory is dumb, but again, I want to know what y'all think in the comments below. I also wanted to explore some theories about the name Dieter that have been floating around online. Dieter is a German name which usually translates to Army of the People, but it also has some other iterations, which is really interesting with a rebel uprising against Lumen already taking place. Also, there's a lot of the names in this series that have greater meanings, which honestly I could just do an entire video on, so I'm going to kind of skip over those. Dieter Eagon is also an anagram for AI generated, which is really wild. This branches off into other theories that maybe the severed floor could be some form of virtual reality. However, it's worth noting that in a AMA from the creators, the creator firmly states everything on the severed floor is real. I linked this and my other sources in the description. This thread does point out the contradictions in this very episode, like a TV plugged into nothing, creepy clone lookalikes, and Irv surviving his night out in the cold. But I'm gonna rebuttal for a second. We don't know that in this universe, some TVs don't simply run on batteries. These lookalikes could just be hired actors. And maybe Irv just got lucky. People have survived much stranger things. Also, I kind of wanted to throw this out there, but Ben Stiller might also just be kind of trolling us, as the name is also famously used in a series of SNL sketches featuring Dieter/Sprockets, and I just like to think that maybe that was a cheeky little homage to that series of sketches, but I don't know. I figured y'all might say something if I don't mention it, so there it is. Now, my own theory is, I think that this entire fable has to be foreshadowing a larger event. After all, it's clearly an important scene and takes up a portion of screen time in what might be one of the most pivotal episodes in terms of lasting consequences thus far. The idea of twins, I think, could possibly hint at a long-held theory that Mark and Helena are actually brother and sister, but now I'm thinking, are they twin brother and sister? Which makes their lovemaking scene very creepy. Yet, it's still creepy, but I think it kind of fits in line with this royal lineage that historically, at least at some point in time, could be very incestuous. So maybe Lumen likes to keep it in the family, so to speak. But I don't don't know. I'm dying to know what y'all think. Again, I credit all these theories and they are linked in the description. I have a bunch of other Severance videos, so please check those out in this playlist and check out some of these other videos, and I will see y'all in the next one.